Good morning and welcome to the Safeguarding in Education Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Before we start, just a special welcome to Councillor Julia Jessel for the first meeting, and also the Reverend Michael Metcalf, whose role will become clear when we understand a little bit more around the new education part of this committee. Item 1 then, apologies.
No apologies received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, any declarations of interest? No. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting, the Safeguarding Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 18th of April. I assume everyone's had a chance to look at them, and if you're happy that I sign them as a true and accurate record. Thank you. Moving on then to item 4, education and current key themes. As the more eagle-eyed will have recognised on the agenda for this morning, it's now Safeguarding and Education Committee, or Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And just to help us in that process of where things fit in with the work plan, we are very fortunate to have, I think, Tim Moss here together with Councillor Jonathan Price, who hopefully can give us an insight into the sorts of issues that are currently washing around the education portfolio and that might be coming to this committee in the near to medium term sort of future. Councillor Price, did you want to start?
So yeah, thank you, Chairman, and I've brought along today Tim Moss, Alec Lucet and Andrew Marston as well with me. So good morning, colleagues, and it's good to be with you. So as a Cabinet Member and the Cabinet Member for Education and SEND, I have always valued the opportunity to attend Overview and Scrutiny. And as you know, previously I would have attended the prosperous Staffordshire Overview and Scrutiny, but following the agreed changes, my portfolio will now be reviewed by the sorry, I've got hay fever, it's really bad today, so apologies. So I'd like to commend the work of the prosperous for their challenge and support of the different aspects in education over the years. I'm looking forward to the same level of challenge and support from this committee. So the purpose of the session today is to give you an overview of my portfolio, and I'm pleased that my officers are here to give a little more detail. I do have to pass on my apologies for Sarah Rivers, our head teacher of the virtual school. She's travelling back from a national award evening last night, where our virtual school have been shortlisted for the local government Chronicle Award for Large Team of the Year. Thank you, Anne. So that's no mean feat, really proud of that team as well. I have a very wide portfolio which ranges from issuing licence for children's performance and employment through to ensuring the appropriate provision for some of our most vulnerable children and young people. I'm sure over time we'll have the opportunity to explore some of these in more detail, but today officers are going to share the priorities for education strategy and improvement for this coming year. And at this point I'll hand over to Tim and other members of the team to share the information contained within the presentation. So thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and as Councillor Price has already indicated, thanks for the invitation. As Councillor Price has indicated, we'll take you through the priorities for education, strategy and improvement, as Jonathan has said, over the coming year. In terms of the presentation, just to say that from an education strategy and improvement overview, we've got 3 teams that sit within that function, and what we're going to do is take you through those priorities for each of those functions. So as Councillor Price has indicated, we've got Dr. Halit Alusi, who's going to take us through the aspects of special educational needs and disabilities. I will go through the virtual school. As Jonathan's indicated, Sarah can't be with us today because of the award. Just to say, unfortunately, they weren't successful. However, they had been shortlisted against Liverpool City Council for the Eurovision contest last year, and Liverpool City Council won. But really pleased that they were recognised for the work that they're doing, particularly around children in care and children with a social worker. And then we've also got Andrew, who's the Head of Access to Learning, Inclusion and Improvement. So at that point, I am going to hand over to Halit, who's going to take us through the SEND information.
Thank you, Tim. This is going to be a brief and whistle-stop overview of what is a very large portfolio. I'm hoping it's going to be useful to colleagues in the room. So we've got our disability special needs strategy, which runs 21 to 26. The vision of that strategy is incredibly clear, and this is about making sure that we've got the right support at the right time in the community in which the child is located. We're a very, very large local authority geographically and incredibly diverse. And I think the sense of needs met in local community is absolutely critical and runs through the vision and everything that we've been doing in terms of strategic activity, particularly for the last 2 years. It's very difficult to summarise all of the work that we've been doing. Clearly, we're subject to a written statement of action and an accelerated progress plan. So there has been an incredible amount of activity that we have briefed colleagues in the room on over the last 2 years in particular. But I just wanted to alert and just refresh on these 4 key areas. So since January 2024, we've launched a pre-statutory initiative. And by pre-statutory, I mean before an education, health and care plan is even considered. So this fits in with that sense of earliest intervention and a highest quality intervention. This is using existing resources, sitting currently within the district model, so within those 8 districts across Staffordshire. And the EHCNA pathway, as it's abbreviated, the Enhanced Assess Plan Do Review pathway, builds on the existing best practice that we see in our schools and enhances that. So where children are presenting with needs that are particularly challenging at the earliest point of presentation, the local authority is supporting and enhancing the activities of school, both financially and both clinically in terms of educational psychology support. It's bringing back best practice into the county and accelerating that progress that we're seeing in our highest performing schools, if you like. And that does fit with, if I just jump to the 3rd column, which is the CDIS and special school strategy. So CDIS is our development of our inclusion teams, formulated of high functioning, very inclusive, very high performing schools that are getting inclusion and SEND practice well. And we've seen, we saw around 21 applications from groups of schools earlier in the year to become part of those teams. We've successfully appointed 5 teams to 5 districts. We're going out again as we speak for further expressions of interest in the 3 remaining districts, and are hopeful that we will get those districts covered. But those teams will be providing support to their colleagues in schools in their districts. And the local authority, again using existing resources, is commissioning those schools to make that best provision. So again, a sense of best practice being cascaded and developed across the board and across the system. For me, it's a highly effective in terms of its evidence base, but also financially responsible way of meeting that increasing challenge that we're seeing around SEND and inclusion that is part of the national picture. And it's something that the Department for Education and NHS England have applauded as best practice and are very keen to see the outcomes of our endeavours. In line with that 3rd column that you can see there, we've also not ignored the increasing and pressing demands in our special school establishment. And by September, we've seen the development of 91 additional special school places. So there's that real sense of developing capacity at both ends of the provision spectrum. The 91 additional special school places isn't the end of our journey in that particular space. There are further projects underway at the moment and feasibility studies to look to increase special school places in line with our gap analysis. Again, a huge piece of work which analysed presenting needs and trends to see whether we could get ahead of the curve in terms of making provision. I'll touch briefly on the co-production promise. One of the key elements of our accelerated progress plan as a result of our written statement of action was the sense that we need to get better at working with families and schools. And that's in terms of the relationship and working together and placing the child and the family at the centre of everything that we do. This year we launched the co-production promise, and the next 12 months is about embedding that co-production promise in terms of how we work corporately together with our families and children. Again, Department for Education, NHS England, as part of our Accelerated Progress Plan, have been monitoring our progress in this space and reporting that they're very pleased with the progress thus far. And finally, in terms of SEND transport, there's been a huge piece of work in that particular space to make sure that we're complying with our legal duties, but also making sure that we're discharging our duties in a fiscally responsible way. We are a large, as I said, geographically large local authority, and that does mean that transport is a key feature for us, where children are eligible for that provision. And there's been a really great piece of work around there that's yielding some good results already. In terms of our accelerated progress plan, I did mention that we're within the scope, and we are actually expecting a SEND inspection. We are in that window, and preparations have been underway over the last 9 months, and even before that 9 months, but stepped up within the last 9 months to get us inspection ready. I think as we're part of the accelerated progress plan activity, we've been inspection ready anyway, but there's clearly that additional work to be done to make sure that we're ready when we get the call on that Monday morning. But the reports that we're having back after our 6 monthly reviews is that we are on track, that they are seeing some green shoots of progress, and I'm happy that we are looking at green shoots, because what we're doing is wide systemic change, not flash in the pan change. We're in a context where there's a massive national challenge around SEND in terms of higher needs coming through and provision and resource being limited. And within that context, what we need to do is implement systems level change rather than surface level change. And the fruits of our labour are going to take some time to come through because of the systemic changes that we're making. But they are coming through, and we are measuring those, and that's been noted by Department for Education and NHS England. This is my final slide before I hand over to Tim and Andrew. You can see there, hopefully, that what we are seeing is a significant upward trend in the number of children who are receiving an education, health and care plan. That's that statutory plan that recognises their special educational needs in a very formal way. But what's really interesting for me is the graph on the right-hand side of that page, which is indicating that in Staffordshire, from a very low baseline, we're seeing more children educated in their local mainstream school rather than in our special provisions. And you can see there, we're the bottom blue line there. And I think, I'm just looking at the trend analysis there. There is a definite uptick in the number of children in our mainstream schools with additional needs. And the top line there is our national picture. And the middle line is our regional partners. I understand that the data will be updated. Actually, as of today, the national data has been released today, so we should see the national and regional trends, and it'll be very interesting to see in which direction they're going. But for me, just two final things to say is that this fits in with our SEND strategy, local schools for local children having their needs met in mainstream where appropriate. And we are seeing us coming in line with the national picture. So I shall leave it there and hand over to Tim. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. So I will just pick up the slides for the virtual school. As I've already indicated, Sarah Rivers is our head teacher of the virtual school. And if we look onto some of those roles of the virtual school, there are a number there that indicate it's that relationship between children in social care, so our looked after children, our children in care, but over the last number of years, that role has widened out, and so there is a role now for the virtual school that looks at the support and arrangements for any youngster who has a social worker. So we talk about children with a social worker as well. And it is the link between social work and education. And the role of the virtual school, and we'll come on to some of those priorities in a minute, really is around ensuring that the importance of education within social care isn't lost. Because clearly one of the things that we know as educationalists, and Sarah as the head teacher of the virtual school will always emphasise, is that importance of education and the doors that education keeps open for youngsters. And it's about making sure that the youngsters have access to it. It's of high quality. And also the important role that the virtual school does from a Staffordshire perspective is engaging in research as well. Hallett's already referenced some of that work that we're doing from a SEND space that's built on research. From a virtual school perspective, similarly, we like to ensure that we're using research but also informing research. So in the future you may hear from Sarah talking about some of the research that takes place. Just so that you're aware in terms of the governance aspect of the virtual school, so just like any other school, the virtual school has a governing body, but that governing body has representation from a broad range of partners, but also significantly the corporate parent panel within the local authority. And so you can see there we've got corporate parent panels sit on that governing body, education partners, and then we've also got children family key leaders, so that our directorate sit on there. But clearly as well, one of the things that I just want to pick up as we also have carers and children's voice colleagues as well. So from that governance perspective, we're hearing what it's like from carers, foster carers, but also youngsters themselves. And then the important point there is the virtual head teacher report, and twice yearly through to the corporate parent panel. So in terms of the priorities for the virtual school over the coming 12 months, it is about, the first one is around that relational and restorative practice in education settings. So again, it's looking at that strength-based and looking at how we support both the youngsters and also the schools to understand some of those particular challenges that youngsters who are vulnerable and who have experience of that social care. It's about making sure that we understand them and we're providing the right appropriate support for those youngsters. Second priority is an acronym that we use as RADI, as you can see there, but that stands for the Raising Attainment of Disadvantaged Youngsters. And again, particularly for those children with a social care involvement. What we're looking at is how do we narrow the gap between all children and that particular group of youngsters through a particular model which says, let's expect them to achieve. Let's have those high aspirations for those youngsters. And again, putting in the support for those youngsters that need it in order to ensure that they're reaching their potential. And then that third one is always one that will be a priority for the virtual school because it can't go away. It's about making sure that there is that alignment between any kind of care provided for youngsters and education planning. So again, we do not lose the importance of education with any care processes. So that's the role of the virtual school and the priorities that our virtual school have for Staffordshire. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to Andrew.
Andrew Martin, Head of Access to Learning, Inclusion and Improvement. Thanks. So broadly, got four areas that my team cover. One is a term called fairer access. It's about ensuring children get access to education whether that's through school places, admissions, school meals, school transport, basically supported in school. Second one is about safeguarding in education settings. It's really about supporting schools in terms of their policy, their practice, not doing safeguarding for schools, but empowering schools through information, updates, networks, and basically ensuring that we're ahead of the game in terms of good practice and changes to legislation and guidance. Educational excellence is there. We've got responsibility to promote educational excellence, albeit our tools to promote educational excellence in an academy world are somewhat blunted. And then the final one, in terms of my team, is the development of education systems, which is basically the ICT systems, the systems that we use for our pupils, our children and young people, the systems that parents can use to access school places, to request school meals, and also the collection of data from schools, phonics, Key Stage 1, census data, a whole host of things. Basically the lifeblood of what keeps us going in terms of our data and knowledge. Okay, got two further slides. So this really repeats what I've just said there in terms of fair access, places, admissions, policy, and free school meals. I guess in terms of our priorities, the provision of school places is a key one. We've got many areas of the county where school places are under pressure. Equally, we've got a number of areas where the demand for school places is declining. We've got a real imbalance. We've got large housing developments across the county, and we are in the process of either expanding schools or creating new schools. We've got 4 new schools opening in this September. We've got hopefully 3 more schools opening in September 2025 and another school opening in 2027. That's great, that's very positive, but we have got some pinch points. Our pinch points are Rugeley Secondary, our pinch points are Stafford Secondary, and we've got Norton Keynes Primary, where we've got a pinch point in terms of the level of demand compared to supply. So in terms of school admissions, we've got an excellent track record in terms of school admissions. Every year we're above the national average, regional average, statistical neighbour average. This year, 98% of young people applying for a school place got one of the top 3 preferences, primary and secondary. The Fair Access Protocol is another challenge. We've got children that are finding it difficult to get a school place. So that really is a process where we work with a group of representative head teachers effectively to decide which school should admit which child, perhaps in the face of some opposition from schools, because often the children come with some history and it needs a school to work well with them. Okay. Home to school travel policy, I'm responsible for. That links back to what Halleck was saying there. We've got a huge amount of work currently ongoing to drive down costs, but also to improve travel independence. So rather than dependence upon the local authority to get a young person to school, we're supporting parents through things like personal travel budgets to enable them to get their children to school with some financial support. Free school meals. We've got a very effective, basically digital service that's run on. I've got half a member of staff that basically manages the free school meal policy and process across the county. Very effective. Then the other areas are education, excellence and safeguarding, so attendance and inclusion. I think all authorities and schools have got some challenges in terms of attendance and increasing numbers of children being excluded from school. So we've got a lot of work there. Very recently, we've started a pilot campaign for younger age groups called Little Heroes. Jonathan, and you've been involved with that, which is promoted from a positive aspect, you know, the importance of regular attendance and being in school on time. That's been piloted at the moment, 20 schools, really positive feedback from them. So I hope to roll that out, trying to get children younger, and then we'll develop those campaigns with schools for other age groups. Of course, it's got to be age dependent. Educational excellence. Depending on what the latest figures are for local authority maintained schools, good or better, is it 88? 89%. So I mentioned about the academy world. At the moment, over 2/3 of schools are academies. They're accountable to the Secretary of State, and that's through the Regions Group of DfE officials. The remaining schools are local authority maintained schools, and we've got responsibility for things like admissions and the funding, direct funding of those. As Tim says, 89% of those are good or better, but as I said before, our tools for engaging schools with educational excellence have been blunted. Basically, government legislation is giving more authority, responsibility and funding to schools to manage their improvement journey, so to speak, and less for the local authority. So our involvement there are particularly around goodness me, I've lost the word, Tim.
Improvement agenda, yeah.
Inspection outcomes and the categorisation of schools. So that's basically using as much data and insight as we've got to try to understand our schools and our academies, to share that information with schools where we see their strengths and weaknesses, so that as they've got responsibility for improvement, they know where we are in terms of our views, in terms of their strengths and weaknesses, and perhaps areas for them to focus upon. Safeguarding practice, as I've said a little bit earlier, that's about empowering schools, early year settings, colleges, etc., to have the best possible practice for safeguarding youngsters. And then we've also got, as part of the welfare service, basically we licence children and young people for for performances in pantos and shows, etc., and employment licensing, milk rounds and the like. Then the final element, in terms of my team, is really around systems, ICT, and I've mentioned a little bit about those. And then the final one is academy conversions. In recent years, we've had perhaps 30 schools a year converting to academy status. That is slowing down somewhat, partly because of COVID. There was a bit of a pause on that, but also partly because we've got fewer schools that are still local authority maintained, so the number of schools converting will reduce. We work very closely with the Regions Group, that's the DfE officials, on supporting their responsibilities in terms of promoting academies amongst mainstream schools. Priorities: safeguarding practice, pupil attendance and reducing exclusions. As I said, making sure we've got more school places, ensuring our policies for home to school travel promote independence and reduce cost, and then just underpinning that, making sure that our systems and data for internally and parent facing are effective. That's me, Tim.
Thank you for that. That was really helpful. The fact that this is a new area of business for this community, for this committee, I think means that we're trying to get a handle on what this actually looks like. And I just wonder, is there a timeline for any of these things? Is there something that tells us when each of these particular areas may well require scrutiny, so that we can make sure that we give it the right amount of attention and timing? Bear in mind that when it comes to safeguarding, there's probably already too much to be done by one single committee. So I think that would be useful. Just a couple of other questions as well. The EHCNA process, that does sound very encouraging. Is the objective of that to reduce EHCPs? Is that what we're doing then? It is something, certainly, and it's only anecdotal, but I visit my schools in my area, and there does seem to be an imbalance around, from the head's perspective, the young people who have them, as opposed to the young people who need them. And I think, given the constraints around finances and the fact, correct me if I'm wrong, I understand it costs the school £6,000 every time that one is granted. So is this, or is the objective then to reduce that number or not?
Thank you for the question. Just as a matter of accuracy, it doesn't cost schools anything to go through the EHCNA process. I think what you're referring to is the school's activity at the pre-statutory stage, so before making a request, is that there's a requirement under the Code of Practice for special needs for the school to deploy its resources to meet the needs of the children before making a request, and that's what the 6K refers to. So just to be clear, that the EHCNE process is our response to a statutory request for an assessment, and there is no cost to the school on this. In terms of the new EHCNA pathway, I say new now, it's been launched since January, and we're supporting 142 children as of today without the need for an EHCP, so without the need for a statutory assessment. The primary purpose of that pathway is not to reduce the number of EHCPs. EHCPs are our response to the request for a statutory assessment under the Children and Families Act. The purpose of the pathway is to meet that child's needs, to support the school to meet that child's needs at the earliest possible point, and to ensure that if they do need an EHC plan, that the assessment is done over time so that it is of a higher quality rather than a static assessment. And that's one of the things that the Department for Education and NHS England have been very clear about in terms of our improvement journey, is the improvement of the assessment process for our children. As a psychologist, I can tell you that the best assessments are done over time and not rushed. But the EHC demands on us, the statutory demands, place a 20-week timescale on the assessment to be done. And given the sheer weight of assessment requests that we're getting, that compromises our ability to make that high-quality assessment. So for those 142 children on the EHCNA pathway, the EAPDR pathway, lots of acronyms, on that pre-statutory early intervention support pathway, their assessments are already being done. Now, should they require a statutory education, health and care plan, the quality of that assessment will be significantly enhanced. So the simple answer to your question is, it's not about reducing EHCP numbers, it's about meeting children's needs at the earliest possible point and making sure that any subsequent assessments that are required are of the highest quality and co-produced with the family and the child.
No, thank you for that. That does clarify it. Councillor Pardeshi, I think you were first.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around school places, and I'm assuming that extends to school places for our asylum-seeking children. The reason why I asked that question is, and please tell me if the situation has changed, I'm aware that there are several children based at MOD Swinnerton who are the children of the Afghani interpreters who were expelled from Pakistan, who you know are the men who supported our troops in Afghanistan. Now, I'm told, yes, they're receiving English, maths, whatever, at the base, but I don't need to tell you or anyone that it's not the same as having a school place, and that is not reaching our ultimate aim of making the most of the potential of our children. So can I ask, please, why it's taking so long to find them school places? Thank you, Chair.
You're absolutely right. There was provision being provided by the Home Office for very basic education on site, and no requirement for the local authority to provide permanent school places. However, the purpose of that accommodation was to accommodate families for a brief period of weeks before they move on to more settled accommodation. Now, in reality, that is not what's happened. So we've got about 50 children, young people, sort of 0 to 18, on site, a number of which have been in the accommodation for over 12 weeks. So we're in discussion with the Home Office and with the Department for Education, because basically the request has come in to say these children really need to be in school, despite what the intention is. So at the moment, we're just simply waiting for information around age groups of children, ages of children. We've got broad figures, and then the intention is to work with local schools, basically, you know, in around Yarnfield and in Stone, to accommodate these young people. There's still some uncertainty about additional funding, because we had in the past additional funding for the first group of Afghan refugees, and also for the Homes for Ukraine schemes. It's not clear what's happening there. The reality is those children will not be in school this academic year. It'll be the start of the September. We simply need more information about the young people to be able to safely and appropriately meet their educational needs. So we're in discussion with MOD, in discussion with Department. But yeah, it's not a great situation, I would say, and I think the Home Office is just under massive strain in the case of all, you know, whether it's evacuees or refugees or whatever. It's been quite difficult to get access to information and clarity for local authorities, but we're working as best we can.
Thank you for that. It's obviously generated quite a lot of interest. And I know that several members who've come here today need to be somewhere else quite shortly. So can I just say that I've got 6 people who want to ask questions. There will be an opportunity, obviously, as we move forward, to do that more in-depth scrutiny. So could I just ask members just to keep it as brief as we possibly can, because I do know that people need to be elsewhere. Councillor Eagland.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. Special educational needs. In Lichfield, where I live, it's not my division, but where I live, there is there's a couple too. And one of them, I've been hearing tales that we are taking students in from other authorities. Can I have your opinion on that, please? And the other thing is, who sits on the committee who decides what child goes to what school? You've said in your report, Mr. Marsden, that there is a committee that sits and decides whether a child has a special need to go to a normal secondary modern school. When I say normal, I mean without going to the two schools that I've just mentioned. I had an instance last year, and I'm sure Jonathan maybe still remembers it, where I tried to get a child into King Edward School, and after doing a lot of research, and there was from you, the officers and Jonathan, the idea was that she wasn't qualified to go, this young girl, but I'd learned that somebody had got their child in to King Edward School that lives in Tamworth, and they'd put their grandparents' name as their register of residence. Now, I didn't go back to this because the decision had been made about Connie, and she didn't have special needs, she had special tuition. And I wondered if the school looked at students, whether they can keep up the school level of exams, or whether they look at children with different ideas. I'd like some reassurance, please. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the question. So in terms of children from other local authorities coming into our schools, that is something that does happen. And we, our ability to control, I guess, if that's the correct word, that particular challenge is limited, because we have children from Staffordshire going to other local authority schools. But what I would say is our analysis is that in terms of our special schools, it isn't a significant challenge. So we haven't got huge numbers of other local authorities placing their children in our special provision. I guess if you were to look at our special schools that sit on the borders of other local authorities, and some of those schools are within 300 metres of another local authority, it would be the local school for that child. As always, other local authorities can consult our special schools for children in their care in terms of their education, health and care plans, and schools have a duty to respond to those consultations. Equally, we will be consulting schools across borders where that's appropriate for our children. But just to reassure you that the analysis suggests that the places in our special schools are not being filled, if you like, by children from other local authority around us. And I think it's a bit of an urban myth out there at the moment, but it would be fair to say that there is cross-border placing, and that's part and parcel of what goes across the whole country.
Worth mentioning phase transfers.
Thank you for that. Can I just again say, I think we just need to be a bit more strategic in the questioning if we could. I know there will be an opportunity to do detailed questioning at some stage. Councillor Snape.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a short question for the Doctor, then for Mr Marsden. In discussion with another councillor recently about something across the county, he'd been talking to a head teacher who said that he had 4 pupils, 2 who had statements, basically, and 2 who didn't. The 2 who did, the parents had loud mouths and sharp elbows. The other 2, who perhaps need them, the parents were not so boisterous and they didn't get them. That's the question for yourself. And the one for Mr Marsden is, you look at school meals, etc., people who get 3 school meals. As a governor for 14 years of school, a lot of the kids who are on school meals have basically less aspiration, the parents do, less achievement at various key stages. Do you work then with schools and other departments in the SEND, etc., to say who's got those, so extra work can be done with those to achieve their greater achievements by the end of the school period?
I'm struggling to make sense of what you've said in terms of what's the question that you're specifically asking me.
Basically, those who shout the loudest get treated well. Those who don't, they don't get a statement, they don't get the thing, basically.
Okay, so I understand the question, thank you. That's certainly not my experience or the case that I'm seeing across the county. Clearly, parents have legal recourse to challenge the local authority. The Children and Families Act is very, very clear about that.
A lot of parents don't go to legal. They accept what is said, and if they're told no, they just shut up. That's where I'm coming from.
Thank you. If you let me to respond. So clearly there are cases where parents who have got the means or the capacity, I guess, to enlist counsel to support them, that's within their gift to do. But what I would say is that our schools in Staffordshire are incredibly supportive of their school community, and where parents may have challenges in terms of asserting themselves and having their voices heard, there are lots of support mechanisms out there for them. The primary position would be for the school special needs coordinator to support that parent. But we also have the SENDIAS service, which is part of our local authority response to supporting parents. It's hugely in demand, as you might imagine, but that is a very, very effective service in supporting parents to have voice and to be able to assert themselves in the EHCP process.
Thank you for that.
I just want to pick up on the second point around free school meals. So as a youngster is eligible for free school meals, they become what's known as a disadvantaged youngster or an ever 6 youngster. And so the school receives what's called pupil premium. And it's the way in which the school then has that pupil premium funding for all of those youngsters that have been identified as having free school meals over the last 6 years. And again, it's using that pupil premium to support them with their learning.
If I could really follow that up just really quickly as well, when Ofsted inspects schools, it does show within the stats within the school as well that they want to see the gap or the attainment between pupil premium pupils and those who are doing well. They want to see the narrowing of that gap to make sure that that pupil premium funding is spent appropriately and goes directly to support those children.
Thank you. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around about academies. I know you've not got as much control over them, but I've got a local primary school in my area that for 25 years has been outstanding at Ofsted, and it's always been a really good school. Everybody's always wanted to get their children in there. And since it's been changed over to the academy, we've had 4 head teachers, 4 different sets of rules, teachers continually leaving who've been there for years and years and years, and who those children know and trust, and they've now just all gone. I went there the other day to take my grandchild to school, and the reception teacher, who's been there since she qualified, was in tears because she'd been told if she didn't move to a different class, then she would be out of a job at the end of the year. How can that be helping our children with special needs when they've been messed about like that? They've not got any consistency of teachers, teaching assistants or anything. All the staff are so upset and moving around at the moment. It really does need something doing with it. Thank you.
In terms of the academy agenda, I think we would all recognise that changing the name above a door does not change the quality of provision in the school. What has changed, though, is the accountability and responsibility. That there are schools that will continue to have challenges, but in terms of that challenge, our responsibility is where we identify there are challenges, it's to raise those with the regions group. So as Andrew's already referenced, the department locally, and those conversations take place regularly about our concerns around the performance of academies. But it's not our role, and we don't have a statutory role to intervene in those schools.
Thank you. Councillor Ed Geller.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for your presentations. I've got 3 quick questions, actually. One is, how do we, children that are placed out of county for education, you know, when we haven't got places because they've got real special educational needs and that, what safeguarding, what do we look after those children? Do we keep an eye on them when they're placed out? And I'm talking, when we're talking about miles away, not just a few miles, you know, so I'd like to know, you know, how we keep a track on that and we look after these children. My second question is, what help do we give to children that we place into schools that's got special educational needs? What help do we give to these schools when they're placed into mainstream school? That's my second question. My third question is, how many children have we got that's in care, that's got special educational needs, that's probably been turned out of schools actually and placed in PRU, and what sort of education and what timescale are they getting on education? Thank you very much, Chairman.
If I remember rightly, your first question was around how we ensure the quality of provision outside of county. So, a timely question. This morning I received an inspection report from our inspectors of a provision that's outside of the county that we've been using. The school in question, there were some concerns raised, and we responded to that by commissioning the inspection, and the outcomes of that inspection are going to lead us to take further action, and that was shared with Department for Education. So we're working hand in glove with Department for Education around that. So that's at the extreme example where there are specific concerns addressed. But I guess for me, the essence of your question is our proactive steps to ensure that when we're placing outside of county. So there are several methodologies there. One is our commissioning relationship, and we have designated commissioners who work with those schools that we commission outside of county, particularly our independent special schools outside of county. And I work very closely with that commissioner, and we have ongoing dialogue between us and those provisions. I'm meeting with one of them that's based in Wolverhampton on Friday, off the back of a previous conversation, to look at the actions that we set collectively. But we also have the annual review process, and parents and the school can call for a review at any time under the Children and Families Act for a child with an education, health and care plan where there are concerns. I guess there's a third element to all of that, and that's where we work very closely with Ofsted where there are concerns expressed directly to Ofsted, either by whistleblowers or by parents or by whomever, and that could be a clinician or a practitioner working with that child. And in those instances, I'm alerted, and then I take action in terms of either commissioning an inspection report or making contact with that school to actually explore the concerns that are being addressed.
Thank you. Councillor McMahon.
The thought behind this question may well be wrong, and if it is, just tell me and I'll back down. Just the sense I get from what you're saying is that the steer is about education, is about attainment. What interests me, particularly in the light of the fact that we live in a rather fragmented society, is emotional intelligence and kids being socially integrated. Things like the EHCNA is some ways after the horse has bolted. One of the problems with send transport, to my mind, is the fact that not only does the kid not go to a mainstream school, but doesn't become socially integrated in their local community because they're not going to the local school. They won't be able to go around the corner and say, is Johnny coming out to play? Because they don't know Johnny. That's the principle behind it. So the question to my mind is, first, do we have a statutory obligation in that regard? And if we don't, if we do, what is it? If we don't, how high is it in our thinking? Because you know, you can get all the A levels in the world and find yourself as an adult being socially awkward, isolated, and resulting in mental health problems. And I just want to get a steer of the balance there. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great question. I think it touches on our SEND strategy, which is needs met where appropriately in mainstream, and if not in a special provision. And that's really important. The prime directive here is to make sure that the child's needs are met and getting the right setting. Now, great if that's in their local community. And a lot of our strategies, well, in fact, all of our strategies in terms of our priorities is about working towards that happening and reducing the need to send our children out of their communities. But inevitably, at this point in our journey, for some children, that's going to be a reality. But it's not our prime directive or our starting point. Part of that journey is to start with the premise that children's needs can be met in mainstream as our starting point, but also to acknowledge that for some children, that may mean that they're in special provision, and that's absolutely appropriate. Our starting point for children with SEND shouldn't be that they need special provision. The starting point is, can their needs be met so they thrive in mainstream? And if not, what more can we do? And if that's not plausible or possible, for whatever reason, then we start looking at special provision in their local community. So it is a real graduated approach, with the base premise being in your community with your peers. Because I fully support your position, from what I've understood, that going round the corner, going out when you're a teenager with your local friends, out on a Friday night or a Saturday night, or whenever it is, if you're lucky enough to go out midweek, should be the basis of a happy life. But the reality of the situation is that, you know, we're working towards that, and it's a challenging environment in order to drive that strategy, but that's our base premise.
Thank you for that. The final question then, Councillor Jessel.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think the general tenor of the questions that have been asked highlight the difficulties I think this committee is going to have of separating safeguarding issues from what I would call normal performance-related issues. And I think that's one of the things that we're going to have to grapple with. There's two areas that I'd like to raise, not that I particularly want answers now, but I think more for this committee to decide whether they may be areas that we look at. One is on your slides, it got by a bullet point that said enhancing safeguarding, which sounds all very good. My question would be, if you think safeguarding needs enhancing, what shortcomings are we trying to address, and how can we identify those? Because I think that's Andrew related what we're doing in terms of providing toolkits. We've got the dynamics of local authority controlled and academy schools, if we're not careful, providing toolkits actually provide schools with a tick box exercise. And how do we, as a safeguarding committee, dig a bit deeper into that to say, yes, they've got the toolkit, but are they implementing it? Is it improving their safeguarding? Are there any shortcomings? I don't know the answer, but that's something I'm going to pose for you. The other area that's always concerned me, whether it's those that are educated at home or as now there is an increasing amount of absenteeism from school, is how do we assess the risks that those children may be under because they're not attending school but are of school age, and whether that is an area that we should be looking at. There are theories as to why the trend is increasing. Is it because more of their parents are working from home and it's not quite such an issue if you're working at home to have your kids there with you, whereas if you've got to leave the house at 8:15 to get to work or even earlier, you know, I've been a parent where, you know, your kids have said, oh, I've got a sore throat, and I've actually got the torch out and said, no, it's not sore, off you go to school because I've got to go to work. But I'm a toughie, I'm a miss. But this is a trend that worries me, because are those children at risk? Are they at risk of being exploited? So they're just two areas, Chairman, that I think perhaps, you know, we could look at in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Jessel. And again, two really great questions. I think, can I do them in reverse, if I may, in terms of the because I do think actually for this committee, I think that work around attendance is really important. And so for me, I think you would want to understand what's happening with those youngsters who are not attending school. So again, we've got that attendance issue. I think you also raised the issue around youngsters who are electively home educated. So in other words, are not in the statutory school system. So again, for me, I think there is something that you would want to assure yourselves that the youngsters that we know about, and I'm going to say that there will be youngsters out there who we do not know about, because I know a number of committees have met together previously around electively home educated, and a requirement, and it wasn't undertaken by the previous government, was to make it statutory for parents to inform a local authority that they had a youngster at home. But certainly what we can do is talk about the work that we do around electively home education. I think that, again, for me, would be something that this committee would want to assure themselves that the work that we do around electively home education is robust enough. Coming back to the enhancing safeguarding practice, though, I think you actually nailed it in terms of what do we mean by enhancing safeguarding practice, was around it's not tick box exercise. And there are always new aspects to safeguarding that come out. There will be new issues that have been identified, whether that be through the police. If we think recently, and I know again Prosperous did a look at what was happening about that Me Too campaign and about that kind of peer-on-peer sexual abuse. Now that is something that's relatively recent over the last 2 years. And that's what we mean by enhancing safeguarding practice, so that what we're saying is we're always on top of what are those new issues that are appearing, and trying to ensure that we've got that consistent practice right the way across the county.
Thank you for that. And I do apologise for pushing this forward, but we've already doubled the amount of time that we'd allocated for this. I think, just to echo what's been said earlier, it does. This area of business does generate a great deal of interest and emotion as well, doesn't it? You know, and I think that I just reassure members that we hopefully will have an opportunity, and I would echo what Councillor Jessel just said there about us thinking about what sorts of things that we ought to be checking. So hopefully we can move forward very positively with that. Can I just have one last question? You talked about being inspection ready, and everything revolves around this co-production. And correct me if I'm wrong, but co-production was heavily criticised in the last inspection process. And if we don't get that right, then some of the others might not work. Does inspection ready mean that we've just got all the data ready, or can we translate from that into a degree of confidence and reassurance that we've moved forward? I'm not looking for song and verse, just a yes or a no would do.
It's an expansive question. So the simple answer is it's not just about the data. One of the key focuses for us was around the relationship, because everything's based on the relationship. So outcomes are based on having that productive professional relationship between all parties. The 6 monthly inspections that we've had have been reassuring in the Department for Education and NHS England are confident and reassured that we're working towards improvements in that space. But I can assure you it's not just about data collection.
That's usually reassuring, so thank you for that. We look forward to the inspection report. Can I just apologise again for running over, but thank you for coming and sharing that with us. I think, Jonathan, you wanted to finish.
Yeah, I just want to take the opportunity to thank the committee and yourself, Chairman, for some really good questions. It's a very large portfolio with many branches and aspects to it, and I do look forward to seeing some of the items being brought forward under your works programme. I've had a look, I see that you've got nothing there yet around the education portfolio, and particularly SEND as well, I think. And also I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank the officers that are here as well. Really knowledgeable, really skilled, and we're very, very lucky to have these guys helping us head up the work that I do under this portfolio. So thank you.
I think that was clear. Thank you very much. We'll just wait for people to leave. If we can move on then to item 5, Children's Services Ofsted Improvement Plan, report of the Cabinet Member for Children and Young People. Councillor Sutton, over to you.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, colleagues. As you will no doubt recall, we bought the plan in the state it was in at the time to a previous safeguarding scrutiny meeting, and stated that we would, once it was submitted and it had been finalised and we were starting with the plan, we would come back and give you an update and an opportunity to question us about it. So the plan is there in the meeting notes. There isn't a lot of detail in the report. It's just the details around the actual plan itself, with the dates, the targets, the officers who are responsible across the partnership, not just the local authority. So that is the improvement journey is being led through two boards, steering boards. One is the Children's Improvement Board operational, which, as the name suggests, deals with the operational issues more internally within the organisation. And the partnership one, the strategic one, is where the partners, police, health, etc., come and we try and deal with the issues that are identified in the Ofsted report that relate to partnership. Both those boards at this moment in time meet monthly, and they are chaired by Julian, who, as I've explained previously, is an outside DCS who's been brought in just for the purpose of chairing that and trying to steer us in the right direction. At this moment in time, we are a few weeks away from the new DCS, Bernie, arriving on the 1st of July. Neelam, it's her last day tomorrow. And so in the interim period, just for your information, really, there was a special committee yesterday where Pat, the Chief Executive, was appointed as our statutory DCS for 2 weeks because we legally, under various acts, have to have a named DCS. That obviously doesn't apply when somebody's on holiday because they're still employed, but because Neelam actually physically leaves and will no longer be part of the local authority on Friday, and Bernie learning doesn't start for a few more weeks, we needed to have that person in place. So that seemed the most appropriate thing to do. So got Nisha with me today, AD for Children's Social Care, who will take you through the actual plan as it is and answer any questions together with myself that members of the committee might have.
Thank you. Neil, I'm over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So, as Mark said, this is a plan which has been submitted to Ofsted. We have met with Ofsted in our last Keeping in Touch meetings. These are quarterly meetings which are already in our diaries, and they raised no challenge to the plan. It was a higher level plan. This is a more detailed plan that is in front of you. And we have agreed that with Ofsted we will carry on monitoring this plan through the Keeping in Touch meetings. I mean, the plan is quite detailed, so I will probably wait till the questions if there are any specific questions, but to give you an update on the progress that we have made since we last met, there were 4 key recommendations that we had from Ofsted, one was about supervision and management oversight for all social workers, and we needed to strengthen that. So I'm pleased to say that we have managed to launch our supervision policy, practice guidance, and procedures, which has been very well received across the service. And just earlier this week, when we had our Improvement Board, the Children's Improvement Board operational group, we are starting to see that good practice examples come out from the service based on that supervision policy. We have set up a monthly task and finish group because the policy has been launched. We need to do some changes to the way we are capturing that data into a Power BI dashboard, which will take a bit of time. So this task and finish group, it's a 6 months group that we have set up, which is going to look at all those improvements at a granular level and inform the improvement board with the data that needs to be extracted from the system until we can get those Power BI dashboard and continue to tweak and make improvements where need be. So that's around supervision policy and management oversight. The other recommendations, there were a couple of recommendations for the front door. So one was about strengthening the quality of, again, oversight in the front door to make sure, those contacts that we receive from external agencies and partners who go towards no further action, that we have got robust oversight so that no child is missing out on a service that they should have received. So we agreed that we will have oversight of 30% of all of those, because we have a large chunk of those cases that go into no further action. We have achieved those targets now, and we can say that there is robust practice with confidence because of that data stability that sits behind it. I get those monthly reports, and again, those reports are shared at the Children's Improvement Board operational group with oversight from all managers. In terms of LADO service, there was a recommendation that there needs to be a more firm line of sight on the LADO service. We have recruited to the technical expert who will start to build those dashboards for us so that everyone has that oversight. The funding for that was approved at the Cabinet earlier, and the person is now in post, so hopefully we should be progressing that work swiftly. What we have also done is we have invited some peer challenge from Birmingham, which is a good local authority. It's not a statistical neighbour, but it's a large local authority. And we have also linked up with Warwickshire and Wolverhampton, both good local authorities again, and looking at their LADO service and seeing how we can take all the good practice, invite relevant challenge from them. They have come and seen our work, how we are delivering things. In fact, they are seeing a lot of good practice in Staffordshire, which they are taking from us, and we are taking some learning from them in terms of how they're monitoring and managing their performance targets. So that work is ongoing. Then there was there was some it was not a key recommendation, but it was a recommendation around our care leavers offer, and local authority needed to strengthen our care leavers offer. So again, pleased to report that we have done lots of work around that, and an enhanced care leavers offer. The paper is due to go to corporate SLT mid-July. We are waiting for the new DCS to start with us, to have their final checks and balances with the DCS and then present it for SLT. Hopefully it should get approved, and then we will take it through the governance process, because there is an ask for increased resources to make our offer an outstanding one. We have also just last week published our directory of opportunities for our children in care and care leavers, which has already started to create that impact on offering those internal opportunities. You know, those are work experiences and taster days for our children in care and care leavers who are not in education, employment or training. But what we want, our ambition is to raise those opportunities, not just for internal county council directorates, but also with our statutory partners. So that meeting is happening at the end of this week, end of this month, with our statutory partners, so police, health police, all the partners, those meetings are taking place. And then our ambition is again to open it up to the local businesses, but that meeting is scheduled around September this year. So we are progressing well on that with the timelines. Last but not the least, there was a key recommendation around support for children with complex needs. That is big piece of work. Lots of work is already happening on that front. However, we are taking a very planned approach to address that issue, because it has got some deep roots, and we will need to look at combined commissioning with health, police and local authority if we are to address those issues and the root causes of those things. So detailed discussions have happened at the Statutory Improvement Board over the last, we have met 3 times, so the last 2 times we've had those discussions, and the June board is focusing on how we plan to start to address some of these issues. This is a bigger piece of work, much wider piece of work, because I think health authorities are doing their bits of work, which are ongoing pieces of work, but we need to join all those pieces and make it one whole. So that is an update, a brief update as to where we are so far, and I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the update. Just a very general question, I suppose, just trying to get a view of where we think the service is at the moment. And bear in mind, I think this report comes on the back of previous critical reports. I think we tended to agree, didn't we, that there were perhaps too many young people in the system, and we previously invested money to try to bring that number down. Is this the report telling us that there's little in the way of data, problem with the LADO, problem with the front door, no management oversight, and difficulties around kids with complex needs? That just translates to me to quite a poor service. I don't mean to be blunt, but are we confident that what we're putting in place, because that does seem to be quite a criticism of what we're doing, and actually the process is there to support and safeguard and protect the most vulnerable in our communities. And I just have a sense, just feel slightly uncomfortable that someone's painted a pretty poor picture, and I don't see that sort of sense of urgency around putting it right. Would you share that view or not?
In an answer, no. What I would say about this, there was clearly identified, and I don't think there's any doubt about this, that there was a lack of management oversight at all levels of what was happening on the ground. But we'll reiterate what Ofsted didn't find, and they were not able to find any child in the whole of the system that was unsafe, and they didn't find any bad practice that needed to be rectified. The issue with the oversight is that we could not, how could we assure ourselves that what there wasn't, because those checks and balances, that daily supervision, that Nisha has already spoken about, and then the oversight of the Lado cases and the oversight of the stuff from the front door, of which there were no cases of we'd made any wrong decisions. It was just Ofsted felt that the oversight wasn't there, and that's what we need to put right. The corporate parenting aspect of it, as that again was disappointing in the end, because I think we've done an awful lot of work around corporate parenting to involve the voice of children. And though I don't want to blame the result on partners, I think there was a lack of joined up work there with partners and partners offering into the system, and things that we really do have. It is difficult to control, and that's how many children that different local authorities, districts and boroughs decide to put into bed and breakfast and things like that. But we've got a group now that involves all the housing providers around the county, looking at that. But ultimately, if a 24-year-old who's a care leaver wants to go in bed and breakfast, they're an adult, that's their choice. I can't do anything about it, So those things can be a challenge. So yeah, so I would, Mr. Chairman, I would push back, on the fact that it was a poor. You said a poor service. The grading requires improvement to be good, and there was no practice within it that was found to be failing. No children were found for any of our actions from our social workers or other professionals not to be at a level that it should be. It was that management oversight. They couldn't understand how that would give us the reassurance that everything was fine. I think the urgency in which we brought in some outside help with the previous DCS to chair those improvement boards, what we're doing with partners and what we're doing internally at that Children's Improvement Board, which is usually held in here. People from across the organisation, not just the service, attend there, including people from legal, all who might have a small aspect of what happens with children in the system. All come together, and all the 8 district leads have to provide a report on where they are based across what the ILAC told us about where they are, where the improvements is, so they can challenge each other and learn from each other at those meetings. So I think there's a absolute high level of challenge and support, both from management and from peers, in trying to achieve that. So although the report might not seem to show that, and you indicated that things were moving at a speed, I absolutely are assured that they are.
Thank you for that. That is very reassuring. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you. You can't prove a negative. So even though Ofsted didn't find any child that was in a bad place as a result of our care, doesn't mean to say that one doesn't exist. And therefore, I think it's incumbent upon us not just to meet the requirements of the Ofsted report, but go one step further. And I'll take an example of that further down my list, if I may. Reading the report gives me the impression that that we may be, and I could well be wrong, but we may be middle management light, and the middle management is good at support and less good at challenge. Because it strikes me that if there was a middle management resource and it had that balance between support and challenge right, we wouldn't have found ourselves where we are now. The next point I want to make is it says in the report that once changes have been assured, ongoing delivery will be under existing resources. How can you... I would like your view about how you can make such an assumption. This is a pathetic example, but off the top of my head, I couldn't think of another one. The public law meetings are now going to be in person rather than online. Therefore, there's travel costs, there's either secretary's time or there's the time of the officer to make the arrangements for the meeting, because they're far more difficult in terms of calendar allocation when they're not online, and just things like that just accumulate and end up costing money. And I just wonder whether we're setting ourselves up in terms of producing a service that satisfies Ofsted that actually ultimately will cost us more money. I find the LADO business, the local authority designated officer, a particular worry, and I would like assurance that that not only is that going to be addressed, but that there'll be some mechanism by which we can assure ourselves that nothing has been missed. In terms of the partnership working, I think that's an unfortunate challenge you've been given, because it takes two to tango. And in this case, it would take about half a dozen to tango, and it could well be a problem. But I think concentrating, for instance, on dentistry in terms of primary care isn't enough. I mean, we all know how primary care in general is a challenge, and I think that general practice will go the way of dentistry, which would be singularly unfortunate in terms of the health of the nation. So not only looking at sorting out the dentistry issue, but in terms of my first point is you can't prove a negative. I think it would be worthwhile investigating their access to the children's access to general practice and whether they're up to date with their vaccines. That's a simple thing. Health ought to be able to tell you, and I'm thinking of particular things like measles, mumps, and polio. We've only got to go back a couple of generations when these things killed. They still can, and I think it would look good in terms of Ofsted to say, look, we've not just done that, but we've gone one step further to show that we're a safe organisation. That's it.
Okay, I'll make a start, and I'm sure Nisha will come in with some of the things. I think part of the supervision issue, and Johnny, you're dead right in the fact that there was probably lots of support, but insufficient challenge. But it also goes a little bit deeper than that in the way in which the supervision reports were actually written, or they were checking what was said. And I may well have said this previously here, and if I have, my apologies. But there is an expectation that when you are writing when a social worker is writing rationales for doing things, it's written in a way that the child could understand, particularly from a child's perspective, when that child might be 18, 20, 25, 30 and wants to look at that file and understand why the decision was made. So it should be written in a way, for example, and I'm just paraphrasing, it was decided that you would have to move foster carers because of A, B and C. This was what was considered. This was the rationale we came to. You were consulted. if they were of an age where they could be consulted on that. And then supervision, and we have and then the supervisor might say, well, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Was this done? And all that needs to be put in the report. And that type of thing, I understand, and I'm sure Nisha will correct me if I'm wrong. That type of thing was not always there consistently. So to put that type of thing right doesn't necessarily need additional staff. It's trying to do stuff right in the first place. But as we move through this, if that does come up, then we will have to ask that question. I think the thing about the second part about travel costs and doing the public law ones, I think that was a reflection, I think I'm right, on the police that were attending these virtually and not in person. But I'm sure Nisha can pick up a little bit more on that. The interesting thing about the Lado is that the capacity in the Lado over the last few years has been increased massively from last time that we were inspected anyway. And I think Nisha's partly has answered that question already in what we're putting there to ensure that there is that oversight. When you come to health, dentistry and that corporate parenting panel last week, we had, I think, a particularly, probably the best ever input from health around their responsibilities with children in care and care leavers that we've ever had. And for the first time, I think they absolutely accepted that the timeliness of doing health assessments and the reviews had not been good enough, and they presented a detailed plan of how they were going to put that right. The amount that they were being asked to do with no increase in resources, had, I think, we all know how children in care numbers have gone up, and their staff available to do those assessments hadn't. So invariably they were going to be behind. But they presented a plan where they feel that they will be in a position to be doing them within timescale, within 12 months. And we did actually talk about vaccinations, about the level of vaccination, the details of which, to be perfectly honest, I can't recall the exact details, but there was no particular issues raised above what there is out there for all children anyway. And of course at corporate parenting we're only discussing children in care, not the wider population. I'll happily hand over to Nisha if there's points I've missed, or particularly if I've got anything incorrect.
Mark, I think you've articulated that fully. I just wanted to say when Councillor, you asked about the oversight and by when will you be able to have oversight on LADO related areas of work. Your concern is right, and as Mark and I have said, we are keeping an eye on that work. We've done that peer challenge. So we are allowing outside scrutiny into the service. We are making those changes, and now with this specialist person coming in to create those dashboards, that will be for us to have a look at those performance indicators from the LADO service more readily on a daily basis. So that's what is the next step for me, but we are keeping an eye, and we share that. I share the concern in terms of not having a dashboard, but in terms of the service delivery, there are no issues, and we are keeping a regular eye on that.
Councillor McMahon.
Thank you for the response. The business about the public law meetings were only a rather pathetic example of whether you think that it's a reasonable assumption, as made in the report, that once the changes have been assured, that that the ongoing work can be done within the current financial envelope, because that strikes me as a pretty hefty assumption.
I would just like to clarify, public law, yes, those meetings went to become virtual during COVID, but they have been, public law is when we are issuing proceedings. They have been a mix of virtual and face-to-face. More, especially when it is an IRH, which is a week-long hearing, they are usually in person. Is it private law we are talking about? Which is, the volume is high, we are looking to reduce that volume, but that's more work we are doing within the LFJB arena. If they are going to go, you know, face-to-face kind of hearings, we know about the volume, we know about the work that is being required. What we are trying to work with the judiciary is, one, we have got that strategy, that's a national strategy, not just for us. That's the national strategy where we are trying to deflect matters arriving before the courts and finding resolution of those private law matters within communities at an earlier stage. But at the same time, things when they do reach the court thresholds and we are issuing, we are usually engaged with those because we are writing those reports for them. So when the time comes and we have to look, we'll have to measure the demand at the time because we are in a flux when it comes to private law.
I'm sorry, I'm not making my point clear. Forget the committee. Forget the committee. Look at the thing as a whole, and you're making the assumption that once the changes are made, the future delivery of the service can be done under the same financial envelope. That's what it says. How can you make that assumption? Do you think it needs to go back to MTFS to be sure that that assumption is valid?
I think, I mean, I get your point completely, Johnny, that there potentially could be a financial impact to anything we do. But within what we are asking to do, we are, you know, and the plan we've put in place, other than one or two little areas, we are not asking for a specific ask for additional money. As we move through the plan and supervision, management, feedback in, if there is if caseloads rise or things can't get, or timescales drift because of workloads, then we will have to look and address that. You know, you said you can't prove a negative, and you're right, but I think that works both ways. You know, let's make the assumption that we can try and do with what we've got at this moment in time. Okay, if that is wrong, if we're keeping an eye on it as we go through, and if there is a need to have a re-look at that, then we will absolutely look at that and exactly what we need. But what we've put in place on the whole does not need in additional resources. It's a little bit about a little bit of a different way of doing things. Improving that supervision policy, that overview does not necessarily need additional resources. But if we find that there are areas that we need to be looked at, then we will look at them.
Thank you for that. Councillor Jessel, you next.
As we know, over the last few years, this authority has invested millions in additional investment in children's services, quite rightly so. And it was part of the transformation, which I was trying to recall, but I think is probably about in its 5th or 6th year. It was a surprise to all of us, this Ofsted inspection. And I do acknowledge the fact that, you know, there is this backstop of no children were at risk. And in terms of the experiences and progress of children in care, that was good. But the rest of it was a surprise. Now, that flags up to me two things. Safeguarding is about managing risk. Is that we weren't measuring the right things. So there was no early warning that things were still not as they should be. The reports and everything else that come through the process, which goes through scrutiny process, cabinet process, performance management process, actually were not flagging up there was an issue. And I think that is something that makes me feel a bit uncomfortable, because there's nothing worse than not knowing what you don't know. And I think as elected members, and I was a former cabinet member, you do rely on officers flagging up where things don't go right, where there are shortcomings. Nothing is ever perfect, but you do need to know, because unless you know, you can't do anything about it. And in terms of safeguarding, that is something that I think we do need to look at, is were we measuring the right things? And if not, what do we need to measure in the future to make sure that we've got a clear indication of how things are improving? The other thing I would raise, and I know it is a real challenge, Councillor McMahon, yourself and the Cabinet member have raised about partnership working, and I know there's been some real challenges with working with the NHS. I've had presentations by Misha where, you know, it can be extremely difficult. The one thing I would say, and I actually counted up, there's corporate parenting panel, there's a health and wellbeing board, which Mark himself chairs, which brings, you know, that's the overarching body. There's the Children's Improvement Board, which has now gone to the Staffordshire Strategic Children's Improvement Board. There's the Children's Quality and Performance and Improvements Board, and there's a Strategic Improvement Board for Children's Social Care and Improvement. My honest opinion is nothing turns partners off more than all these boards, all the support that has to go to producing documents all the time. You end up getting people sat round here or in any venue actually totally switched off. And actually, what do they achieve? So in terms of driving this agenda, you don't improve things by having 20-odd people sitting round a table at endless boards. Equally, you don't improve services by sitting behind a computer screen. Middle management, totally agree with you there, Johnny, but you need to get out and about. You need to see for your own eyes, talk to your staff, talk to your users. I did it as a cabinet member, and my goodness, it was the best education I ever had. I've always done it in my working career. And I think needs to be a culture change where just producing reports, to go through the endless mill of board meetings is not the way forward. And I would offer the challenge to say, actually, are all these boards needed? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. I think just to add a couple of points to that, because when you presented the plan informally, I think we made exactly those points. There did seem to be a cast of thousands involved in it. And just on the 2 points that have been made there, one about the data and not being taken by surprise. I note that we have an intelligence and analysis team, and actually we're going to spend £150,000 on an advisor, I think, to that. It just makes me wonder and fearful of whether we've got the right people in our intelligence and analysis team if we're not seeing these things coming. And actually, is it an admittance that it's not working well if we need to throw another £150,000 at some sort of consultancy to get that right? And on the second point that Councillor Jessel made, is one important to me really as chair of safeguarding, because we do talk about this strategic panel and the operational panel. Again, I share that concern about how do you drive that forward when they're two panels almost talking about the same thing. And where is the scrutiny? Where is the governance? Who's in charge? Do these panels come to this committee, or is there another scrutiny committee around them? It just seems a little grey to me at the moment about who holds who to account, because it is incredibly important, as we've already outlined.
So if I deal with the point that Julie made second in the amount of different panels and stuff, what you failed to add to that was the amount of governance that anything to do with partners has to go through in relation to health as well, and the stuff there. And if anything comes out of your recommendations going forward, I would certainly appreciate a recommendation to have a look at the general slimming down and of the governance and the amount of boards and who they report to and all that going forward. And that's not just in relation to improvements around Ofsted. And the lines of that, I mean, things like the Health and Wellbeing Board, it's statutory. There's an awful lot we can do about that. But there are officers that come to me and say, you know, this is the 7th time I'm presenting exactly the same thing to 7 different, you know, and unfortunately I'd include yourselves in that as well. So I think generally there does need to be a way, you know, and that is something that has been, in fact it was raised at the last partnership board as a you know, as a specific issue and problem. So that is very, very much on my agenda. So a recommendation from this committee along those lines, I think, would very much help us to be able to go that way. The general questions you ask about the quality of individuals and that, have we got the right people in that performance there? I can't answer those specifically. You know, that's a management thing about whether people have got the right skills and things like that. I don't know. But do we produce at the end of the day, the right data? And if we talk about corporate parenting, which I've chaired for a while, I'll be honest, we've always struggled with getting the type of data that we wanted, data on a sheet that we can look at. That is very much changing now, and looking at that, getting that data that addresses those issues, not just that were highlighted by Ofsted, but things that are linked to them, things that are our responsibility as a local authority and the corporate parents for those children. But perhaps I don't know whether, Nisha, there's anything that you can add at all on any of those areas.
In terms of data, and are we looking at the right data? Statutory social work and data that Ofsted look at, the data that we look at to measure ourselves, it can very easily be pulled together in what we call a chat. It's a tool that Ofsted use to benchmark all local authorities. All local authorities use that to benchmark their own practice against their national averages and stat neighbours. And we do that regularly. We always have been doing that. I'm very happy to bring it here if it requires that level of scrutiny, but it's a standard data set that is used by every local authority, which we also use and we monitor. On top of it, because every local authority is organised in a slightly different fashion, we do look at some details which are specific to Staffordshire, but majority of the data is the same for every local authority, every children's services. So there is nothing different that any other local authority would be looking at that we are not.
I understand that applies to a lot of local authority activities, but in terms of this authority, in terms of the transformation process which has gone on for years, there weren't early warning signs that we would get this kind of Ofsted. So I think my challenge back to the management, and it's a challenge for this committee, is what needs to change that you as managers have that early warning and therefore cabinet members scrutiny, etc., etc. Because we didn't know what we didn't know, and certainly we didn't know about this. That's my challenge to you. There may be the national data sets, I understand that, but when you run a business, all businesses are in a slightly different format, different stage of development. You need to develop your own performance indicators to actually say, these are our weaknesses, these are the things we need data on to know that we're making the right progress. They may be in addition to the national data sets. National data sets don't always tell you that much. But in terms of management, that's what you need to develop so that you have the assurance and then you can give us as elected members the assurance that things are going in the right direction. That I don't believe has happened in the past. And as a committee, again, only a suggestion, perhaps that's something we need to have assurances on, that you will be collecting that activity, that data, to be able to accurately give assurances or flag up a red flag if things aren't going in the right direction. Most plans fail on first contact type of thing. But we obviously hadn't got that right, and we need to, because in terms of safeguarding and managing that risks, we need to know. Thank you.
No, thank you. I think I'd go back to the point that if we do have all the data right, then why are we spending £150,000 on consultancy? Councillor Eagland.
Thank you, Chair. There isn't anyone in this room that was disappointed, more than disappointed, with the Ofsted report. It was a shock, knowing that we sit at a meeting like this, and some of us are on corporate parenting as well, that we didn't have any idea that this was going to be so bad from Ofsted. But having said that, you've come up with some good ideas this morning and spoken very genuinely about the mistakes, and you've reassured me somewhat, and I hope everybody else, that you're on the way to putting things right. One of the good things that I have listened to was the fact that you're going outside and you're looking at other authorities. Benchmarking never did anybody any harm. You learn an awful lot from different people by talking to them. And I only hope the ones that you've taken on board with your benchmarking, they've all had a good report from Ofsted. and that's all I can hope for. But I do wish you all the very best for the future. And as it's already been just said, we need to be kept informed with what we do. I felt a lack of information when I read this, and I asked myself, what am I doing going to these meetings? And I didn't have any idea of what's been going on. It's no reflection on you, the officers. It's just, as Julia has just said, the information just wasn't there for you to get hold of. But I do wish you the very best for the future.
Thank you for that. Councillor Snape.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank you for coming back in for Lions Den's the first thing, because you must come in here and to other meetings of a similar nature and think, why are we going back there when all the list has been given by Julia? Much of what to discuss has already been brought forward. Most people in this room have worked in this sort of situation with safeguard sets for perhaps 40 years plus, perhaps even longer for some people. As you know, I was sort of quite against the transformation process when it started 5 years ago, because the numbers involved haven't gone down, but I don't see why they will ever go down, because the children who are in our care are there for a reason, because they have to be. And I would worry more if initially we were trying to look at a third going down. If we had a third children less in our care, that would really worry me, because they're there because they're needed. And we've got the staff to deal with it, etc., etc., etc. And that's to me what it's all about. But when I read the summary, following inspection, if a local authority is deemed to require improvement, we talk about partnerships. But this is about us as a local authority, not what the police do, not what health do. It's about us. We are the one who are being criticised. And I take it personally that as a member of this council that we have been criticised. He didn't say in the report that the police had not done this had not done that. It's us. The buck stops with us, really. I mean, the job you've got, it must be the most difficult job in the world, same as when Julie had adult social care. When things go wrong, the buck stops with you. And for the job you do, I'm just so proud. I've known you for so long. But really, I'm going to put it, we've just got to keep doing what we're doing. The chair has mentioned the middle management as council thing you have. I know Janet just said there's no criticism of officers. Well, I'm sorry, there's got to be criticism of officers. That was why the report was so bad. I know no children was ever put in danger, but really things weren't brought to your care. They weren't brought to the head of service care because that middle management didn't challenge. So I really think we've got to say it is down to officers not doing a job properly. I'm sorry.
Comment on that. You use, I made a note of it, you use the term so bad. No. You know, I'm not making light of anything, but I do wonder what you'd have said if we'd have been found to be inadequate from that perspective. But that Sergeant, and I take your point completely, Paul, around these come to the local authority to teach children's services, it's Staffordshire Children's Services or whatever local authorities, you know, and although there are mention of partners in it, then it's us at the end of the day, it's our DCS, it's our organisation, it's me, it's the Cabinet, it's all of us that within this report as part of the local authority. But partners are fundamental to an awful lot. You know, there was lots of comments in the report around health and things like that. There's the housing things and things like that. And it is the way we try and work with partners, you know, to be able to try and achieve those better outcomes for children, and also safeguarding statutory is a three-way partnership. It's not just the local authority, it's the police, health and the local authority. We are all joint partners in this, and we all have an equal responsibility. Although we are children's services, so I get your point, it always appears on the face of it to come back to us. And that's why I hope going forward with the safeguarding board and the new terms that have been set, that we will be able to improve how safeguarding within the county is, how people are reassured that safeguarding of children is paramount and of paramount importance. And that is another committee that has to meet, that fits in with this governance to decide what they do and what another committee do, so we're not all trying to do the same thing at the same time and causes unnecessary work and time for all of us. And it's how we try and cut through. So you spoke about transformation, and you're right, Paul, you were never slow to come forward in your views about transformation. If there was something with transformation that didn't necessarily go as we would want it to, that was what we ended up, and COVID didn't help with this, but I'm not going to make particular excuses, is the fact that in those crucial management roles and mid-management roles, we ended up with people with fantastic potential and skill, but not the working knowledge and to be able to do that role. But that is very much put right now. I've been and visited all the district leads. Myself and Jonathan went to most of them, but I've been to all of them. I've spoken to the district leads. I've listened to what they've said. I've been to their management meetings when they come together as a team to discuss each other's issues and problems. And while I was out in the districts talking to staff about what they see as their issues and problems, you know, and I am absolutely confident that the position we've got now with the district leads and the officer who is ultimately in charge in that middle management is now well experienced and well positioned to be able to put a lot of those things within that supervision middle management world right going forward. They know what needs to be done, you know, and they are starting to do it. Of that I'm absolutely reassured.
Thank you. The final two questions then. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chairman. It's more of a, just to say I agree with what's been said this morning, to be quite honest. We rely on information from officers, whether it's good or whether it's bad. Unfortunately, in this instance, we haven't known, because it was a surprise to all of us, I believe, about this, what's happened. We are lay people, majority of us are. for the want of a better word. So we can only go on what's been fed to us by officer reports, etc. I think there's a bit of a dual purpose here. Maybe we should be doing something else a little bit more as a scrutiny panel into asking the right kind of questions. Maybe this is something we can pick up on. I remember when I first got onto this council many years ago, as we used to go round to the children's care homes with an officer. Honestly, I've been everywhere in this county with an officer out ourselves, and we would see what the officer was asking the child, and we would be there as a witness ourselves, which to me gave us more of a hands-on than what happens now. I'm not saying we should go back, but having said that, what goes around comes around usually. Sorry. I'm a big believer in that. And I think that we would get a better insight then of what actually does go on when we go to speak to these children and young people. So I'm just throwing that into the mix. I remember the day we used to do that many years ago. We were all over the place. It might not be the appropriate time to do it now, but I did think it gave us more of an insight of what was happening within the service itself. And we were then able to make our own judgments on whether it was the rights or wrongs. At the moment, we're being fed the information by officers. And there's good and bad in all kinds of people, and we are perhaps not asking the right sort of questions. I just wanted to make a point on that, Chairman. You know, whether it's feasible to do anything, but I think it's important because the ultimate buck stops with us. We're corporate parents, and it's not nice to have this in front of us. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's probably a discussion point for one of our pre-meets, I would have thought. Councillor Sutton?
Just picking up on what Kath said there. With the corporate parenting panel, and I think we discussed this at some length, and those around the table who have been on corporate parenting, how we get the voice of children and understand what they have. And if we go back 4 years, something like that, somebody from the Voice Project that worked with children in care to get understand what their concerns were, used to come to every meeting, give a 5-minute, 10-minute report, and that was about it. We did used to have a takeover day where the young people used to come and do the corporate parenting panel. I don't really think that achieved an awful lot. So what we replaced that with now is that we split the corporate parenting panel up into groups, and those groups go and meet with children in care at the Voice Project, listen to what the children have got to say, and from what they say, use that to influence what a corporate parent and take away as their priorities. And I think that has worked really well. But Kath, it is difficult to get members to always attend those meetings. We don't want 10 members turning up and 3 or 4 children, because they'd all feel, overwhelmed by all these adults, because there's officers there who work for the Voice Project as well. But sometimes the attendance, on this record, hasn't been as good as it could be. But I think that is really valuable experience when I've been myself, and you can talk to children who are in the care system, and get an understanding from their perspective what they see as the issues, and they're not always what we think. And I think that's the important point about it, and gives them the opportunity to influence going forward.
No, thank you for that. I think you make a really good point. Final question then from Councillor McMahon.
It's more a statement than a question, really, and it's about the partnership issue. And my experience of both health and being a councillor is that interagency dynamics is poor in this county. It's difficult. And therefore, it's going to be a struggle to get over the line. The Health and Wellbeing Board, you perhaps making a better fist of it than I did. I did it twice. And it just shows the difference in culture of all these different organisations, I think. And it makes it very difficult. And I think you've got to show all the effort you've made, irrespective of whether you get the deal. It would be the only way to do it, I think. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you again for coming and talking us through the plan. I'm sure we'll be going over it time and time again as time goes on. But thank you for the reassurance and answering some of those questions. I also just wonder if the panel members would agree, but I think I would like to just record our thanks to Neelam, who's leaving, I understand, on Friday, for all of her work while she's been here around safeguarding young people. I think we've all seen, the service move on. So if you'd pass that on and we'll record that, that's very kind. Thank you again. Just very quickly, I think it's the last thing, the work programme planning. Nothing else after that. We've had a couple of discussions, haven't we, around what we plan to scrutinise as we move forward. And I think pertinent to that is the fact now that we are the education committee as well. And we already heard from the session this morning about SEND, and clearly that raised quite a lot of issues and concerns. We also had in this document, which most people have seen, a list of issues that we think are important for us to look through as a group. I've had some feedback, and I've looked through it myself, and what I've tried to do is recognise the fact that we are tight on time, we can't do everything. And there are certain things in this list, for example, update on the provision of services for children and people, 6 new in-house children's homes. Whilst it would be interesting to hear about that, it doesn't raise any red sort of flags with me about safeguarding. And rather than just hear and put people out to come and describe how these new homes are working, there might be some value in that. But when we are trying to prioritise some of those issues, I have prioritised 6 that I think we should be doing. What I would say is, if you disagree, please read through and we can alter them. But I think there are 6 that strike me as the sorts of things that this committee should be looking at. The first one is about domestic abuse and the new contract. The second one is, as we've just heard, Ofsted inspection of children's services. I think that will form an important part of this committee as we move forward. The third one is the continued developments with the children's MASH, and I think that's linked to Children's Services Implementation Plan, of course, and all the issues that we've already discussed around that. The fourth one is the review, progress, sustainability, recent actions that successfully reduced adult safeguarding concerns. I think that is heading in the right direction, but I still think that would be a useful issue to bring back to this committee. Adult vulnerability hubs and the performance data. And then the last one, the internal recruitment risks of modern day slavery. I think that is particularly important given the fact that we are largely a rural area, and a lot of this issue around modern day slavery tends to be people working on farms and various other things. So that would be my prioritised 6. I'll be looking to see where we can fit that in. If people, please have a look at the list, and if you think that there are other things that we ought to be doing, then please say. I also think the other request is following on from what we heard about SEN this morning, and hence I asked about a timeline for delivery for some of these things. We clearly do need to be scrutinising some of those issues that we were trying to scrutinise. And again, I apologise for cutting people short, but we just didn't have the time to do that.
We were offended, Chair, but we knew it was...
Yes, that. Yeah. So I suppose really what I'm asking for is answers on a postcard. Really, what do you think we should be looking at? Do you think there's some value in another meeting, maybe on Teams, where we invite one or more of the people we've spoken to this morning, just to try to get a better understanding of some of the issues that we should be talking through, so that we can include those in. What I don't want to do, though, is fill up our agenda with the 6 things that I think are important, and then we've got no room. So I think we need to consolidate those things as we move forward. Paul.
It was mentioned this morning, home education.
Yeah.
We did a review about 6 years ago now on that. The staffing went up threefold, various other things went. Could we just have perhaps somebody come and talk about it?
Yep.
Say how it's gone, how it's going, what they view it as, to see if we do need to relook at it.
Yep.
But they may totally satisfy us if they come and speak to us just as a way of just
Well,
having another look at that, as it was mentioned this morning.
No, I think you're right. I do wonder whether a Teams meeting with some people where we can put those questions, and then at the end of which we can come up with a practical list of what we think should be included. Johnny?
I think it'd be worthwhile looking at the plan for Cabinet and what education things are coming to Cabinet, because clearly that may involve a change of policy or an additional policy or whatever, and to have a look at that before it goes, I think would be, even if we didn't think it merited a top priority, I think part of the role of this committee is to look at what's extant, but also look at what's coming, and inform the cabinet member of our views.
I think hence why I asked for that sort of timeline of what was coming along. Helen, I wonder if is it possible to get that sort of list?
Yes, so I always monitor the forward plan anyway, because that gives us an idea of what's coming to Cabinet. I've done that for safeguarding, so I'll do that the same. I think one of the key things here, because obviously you've broadened your remit considerably, there's a lot of work, there was already a lot of work. I think it's about looking at different ways of doing that work, and I think a briefing, we've always had the opportunity to have briefings if we wanted, and I'm always slightly nervous about asking for a lot of paper briefings, because you're adding quite a lot of work to people who are already busy. But what might be quite useful is if, and probably better for yourselves because you get to ask questions, if we have some, when I say in person, I don't mean in person, I mean Teams briefings, but where people can talk to and explain and outline some of the issues with you. That might be quite helpful, mightn't it? And then from there, you know whether that's something that needs to then be incorporated in further work, whether that's coming to a formal scrutiny or whether it's, inquiry day, working group, any other work. What I'll do as a result of today, there's a couple of things I think. Obviously, the complaints are now off this committee and they go to corporate, but that does mean also that corporate may very well highlight some things as a result of their consideration of complaints for this committee to look at. That's one of the areas we're doing. Obviously, education and SEND are here as distinct extras to what, so we're not just looking at them from a safeguarding point of view. So that obviously is going to have an impact as well. But in previous years, we have had an informal work programme planning session, and I don't know whether members feel that would be... I'm conscious that we've had a very busy morning, haven't we, as you always do, because we scrutinise so thoroughly, and maybe it's an opportunity we need to be looking at the things we've got, prioritising from what you all have put forward, looking at what is key in education at the moment, and then trying to meet together informally to decide what your priorities are and plan out. You've got your July meeting planned, but nothing else.
Johnny.
The chances are our approach to education will be very different from Prosperous. But it would be worthwhile looking to see what Prosperous have done in the past few months, because that might help inform us where we want to go in the future, and what we don't want to do if it's already been done adequately.
Thank you. I also think perhaps if the inspection is imminent, if it's marvellous and wonderful, then involvement in it will probably be far less. But I suspect there might be some issues raised, and maybe we take our lead from whatever the inspection result was. And also on that, do we have such a thing as a risk register? Is there a register for the organisation that, because there must be a plan and a risk register associated with it. I wonder if we have such a document.
Yes, and I can certainly pull together what we're, the areas of potential concern, I suppose, is what you're looking at. But also there was quite a bit of work referred to. I mean, the Me Too campaign actually was ourselves in conjunction with Prosperous and Health, wasn't it? That the work we did on that. So you've received that report previously anyway, because we although Reverend Metcalfe was the one who chaired it, we had representatives from all three of the scrutinies on that. But there's other work too that just when they were talking to us, I thought I ought to really dig out for you and circulate for information. So Mr. Snape's just referred to it. There's been 2 working groups on home educated children in, well, it's probably going back. It doesn't seem that long ago, but it's probably going back. Clearly that's something that was hugely impacted by COVID as well. But I'll look those out and circulate them so members can read them at their discretion. Also, there's the Little Hero pilot project that they mentioned, which is trying to improve attendance. So I'll do some digging on that. So my apologies, but probably what you'll get over the next few weeks is quite a lot of reading. but hopefully that helps inform then what things you want to bring to a future meeting. And would an informal Teams work programme planning be helpful, do we think?
Any objection to that? I think that would be a useful exercise for us to do, and then at least we can have read all of the bits and pieces and come up with a provisional list of what our work programme needs to look like. It is dependent on other things, of course, but I think that would be a sensible way forward. Yeah. All agreed? Thank you very much. Exclusion of the public, I don't think there's anything else, is there? No. Thank you very much for coming along and your contributions. Thanks again.